The end product's going to be a bill, a legislative bill. Lots of things we can do with that bill, lots of considerations that can be thrown in, taken out. We need to know what's going to sell, what's going to cause people to see it our way, so to speak. So that first round of external context is very, very important.
One of the things, of course, that we expect to come out of this process is the ability to identify issues before they become issues, and to shape the issue, if we can, by our own behavior.
What the officers have done in committing to this program at the Wigwam is to say, by this being a two-way program, that they are willing to change this business, if need be, to accommodate the input, if you will, from customers and other key constituents. Now, in the past, has that been our mindset? Have we been anxious to make changes in this business? Absolutely not.
We need to certainly identify issues ahead of time, not be in a reactive mode.
The political process, I believe, this year is going to focus very largely upon economic development. And that's why that has been chosen as really a central message. That's one that we understand, the people of the state understand, they're interested in it. You'll hear a lot of rhetoric about it, and I think you're going to hear a lot more about it. We intend to be players, participants in the discussion on that issue.
I really, really admire what the officers have done, because they have really stuck their necks out. And they have said, we will take the input from the customers, and if they are telling us in reasonably large numbers that something that is wrong with this business, that we are not accommodating customer needs to the extent we could, and there's some better ways to do this, then we're going to change it.
We need to know what these people think. We need to know what kind of issues they think are real, what kind of roadblocks they see, what kind of problems.
Some of the things that have just happened this year, in addition to the late payment penalty we were talking about and the things that are going on there, that I think we might have anticipated would have been our EAS hearing in the Green River, Rock Springs area, had we had this in place, and Ray out there really actively doing these things. We probably would have caught that early on. We might have gotten to Senator Prevedel before everybody else did, and who knows, we may have avoided a very nuisance, very bothersome thing, and one that will perhaps have adverse consequences that we don't know about yet. Also, I think our whole coin phone removal problem, where we had a little bitty nitty thing that was done that just enraged all kinds of county commissioners and people that we really can't afford to be crosswise with, had we been up and running with all of this.
We really have to break those shackles, and I'm here to tell you that I've committed to it. I truly believe it. And through the course of the next 3 days, I'm going to ask each one of you to make a conscious decision in your own mind, whether or not you believe it, whether or not you're committed. I'm going to ask you one more thing. If you can't commit, if you don't believe it, then please, for your sake, for the company's sake, for all of our sakes, get the hell out of the way so the rest of us can get on with business. That's the message, plain and simple.
There's nothing wrong with being proud of our tradition and the fact that we certainly, we are the best telephone system in the world, in this company, and continue to be. So we have that very proud tradition. It hasn't been lost. But going forward is the only way to go.
We're going to talk about issues. We're going to talk about the constituencies that we need to deal with to handle those issues. And then we're going to talk about our objectives. What do we want those constituencies to do to help us manage those issues? Certainly we're going to talk about deregulation, but we're going to go far beyond deregulation in this session, because the techniques that we've identified here were around before deregulation, and they're going to be around long after deregulation. And frankly, I doubt that with all the technological changes in communications, in the ways that we can be in touch with one another, exchange information and feelings and so forth, I doubt that these techniques are going to change much because they're rooted in basic human nature. Then we're going to talk about one far more important subject. And that more important subject is this. What desired behaviors are we seeking from our constituents? Now, I want you to pay particular attention to those words, because the philosophies and the techniques that we're talking about here are not just to get warm feelings from people. They're not even basically to deal with people's attitudes, because that takes a long time. What we're after is nothing less than what people do. How do they act? How do they behave? And the question is, what behaviors on their part are desirable for Mountain Bell in order to be able to manage its issues and deal effectively with its constituencies? Now, that's pretty heady stuff. We're talking about motivating people to do certain things, or not to do certain things, or to let the company do certain things. But these techniques have been proven over time to indicate that indeed we can get desired behaviors. But of course there's a caveat that comes before all that. Do we know what those desired behaviors are? I think where organizations fail to manage their issues, it is generally in our experience because they have not sat down as an organization, used all their best brains in the whole organization from top to bottom to specifically list what do we want people to do, what do we want specific people not to do, and what do we want people to trust us, to give us their consent to do in order to manage this issue. In American society now is a big pie, and that pie is subdivided into just countless groups and subgroups and sub-subgroups, and in every single group and subgroup there are opinion leaders. In other words, opinion leadership, with the coming of better information sources and with individuals having more leisure time to participate in public issues, opinion leadership moved from a few at the top of the heap to everybody in society. So that's why when we run a political campaign for a client, we're not sure we want the banker to support our guy. In fact, we'd usually rather not have the banker supporting our guy because that'll turn off a lot of people. But if I can get Susie, who holds a coffee klatch in the 3rd Ward on Thursday mornings, or Joe, who's the guy at the shop when they're all washing up after the day's work, who says, you know, I kind of favor Tim in this next election, and everybody around the wash-up says, yeah, okay, I hear you, Joe. Tim sounds like a good guy to me. Those are the ones we want. Being an opinion leader no longer means you got to have money, a big job, even a very good education. It means you have to be trusted and respected by the people with whom you interact in your daily life. How do Americans, individually and as a group, make decisions? The scholars, of course, had to give it a fancy name. You know, they couldn't just call it a roadmap on how we make decisions, so they called it Diffusion Process. And the subtitle of this is Studies in the Flow of Information and Influence. And those are the key things that they found. They found that though the bullet theory was dead, people wouldn't just react to information, that nonetheless you needed to get information out, otherwise people didn't even know that the issue was on the agenda. But once you get the information out, everything changes. And then it becomes a question of who is influential to convince others what position they ought to take. The scholars found, in fact, that there are 5 steps or phases that the individual mind goes through in arriving at a decision in our kind of a society. The first step they called awareness. Awareness is obvious. If you don't know that dereg is before the people, you can't do anything about it, you can't even think about it. Once you become aware, if you decide gee, that's kind of interesting to me. You don't just dismiss it out of hand. Then you move on to a step called interest. In other words, you try to get information to satisfy your interest, to discover whether you really care. In those two phases, learning about the issue and then getting the information to decide whether you are apt to favor it, information is the key commodity. And we want it so badly that we will accept one-way communications from advertising, news releases, videos, brochures, mailings, and those could be completely impersonal. We cannot ask questions, they cannot talk back. We're willing to take it on paper, film, celluloid, but then something happens. Then we come to a phase where all 240 million Americans are from Missouri, and they go off in a closet into a phase called evaluation. We go off and we really think, you know, how do I really feel about this? If the idea, product, service, whatever, survives phase 3, everything changes. And we now move to influence, because phase 4 is called social trial. And in social trial, the key thing is no longer information. The key thing now is peers. Which opinion leaders in my circle do I trust on this subject to reinforce my tentative decision? Only if we can get through this do we make a decision. When we're talking about peers, of course, it's no longer one-way communication. It's two-way now. We can discuss it. We can ask questions. And, of course, it's entirely personal. Just you and the opinion leader, or a small group of you discussing the issue. Now think for a minute about this model. And the evidence, as I say, for this is overwhelming and growing every year. And think about some of the things we've always done to deal with issues in our organization. First of all, most organizations are 50 years behind the time, and they still believe the bullet theory works. What's the response, for example, when you get involved in an issue? Isn't the word, well, let's get the facts out, right? I mean, let's tell them what's really happening. Let's get that information out there, as if that would solve the problem. Or inside the organization, if something is supposed to happen and it doesn't, and I ask you about it, what do you say to me? You say, but I sent the memo. See, I mean, I sent the information, and so naturally, automatically, it'll happen. But of course, we know better than that. And we have to now, today, in this new environment, learn to apply both steps of the two-step flow. We need to get some information out there to get that issue in people's heads, get them thinking about it, give them some background data, and nothing is going to happen if that's all we do. We then have to see to it that the opinion leaders in our society are personally well informed, so that they then can pass on that information to the people that they influence. And any campaign that an organization undertakes in which they overlook this probably will fail, and from everything we know, deserves to fail. If we win without this, it's sheer luck, sheer happenstance. But there are some other lessons from this too, and I think we need to be very clear about these. First of all, think for a minute about what's happening here. A lot of people become aware of an issue, but they don't give a hoot, so they drop out. Others will accept the information that we give them on DREG, and they'll decide, forget it, it's not for me. Others will go off in a closet and start evaluating it and decide, no, I'm not for it. Others may think it's a good idea, and then they go out and they ask their opinion leaders, and they say, that's a lousy idea. So that of every 100 people up here that learns about an issue, we're lucky today if 5 of them actually make a decision about it. Now, what does that mean to us? It means that the old idea of just dealing with people every once in a while simply won't work.